The knock came on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 24 hours after they lowered Michael Martinez into the ground. James Robinson had been standing at his kitchen sink, rinsing a coffee mug he'd already rinsed twice, when he heard it. 3 soft taps, hesitant, like whoever stood on the other side wasn't sure they should be there at all. He dried his hands on a towel Margaret had embroidered 15 years ago, the stitching frayed now but still legible. Home is where the heart is. The irony wasn't lost on him. His heart had been 6 feet under for 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Not that he was counting. When he opened the door, Linda Martinez stood on his porch, holding a small linen handkerchief. The fabric was cream-colored, delicate, with tiny blue flowers along the edge. James recognized it immediately. Margaret had given it to Linda back in 2018 at a neighborhood barbecue when Linda had gotten emotional talking about her mother's passing. Margaret always carried extras, always ready to catch someone else's tears. Linda's eyes were red-rimmed but dry. Her hair, usually neat in a low bun, hung loose around her shoulders. She wore the same black dress from yesterday's funeral, wrinkled now like she'd slept in it, or hadn't slept at all. "James, I know this is weird, but I can't be in that house right now. Every room smells like, I don't know, death. Can I just sit on your couch for a bit?" He stepped aside without answering, letting the screen door swing wide. She moved past him into the living room, and he caught the scent of hospital soap mixed with something floral. Probably the arrangement someone had sent. There'd been dozens at the service. James remembered because he'd counted them during the eulogy, needing something to focus on besides the casket. "You want tea?" "Yeah. Anything that doesn't taste like hospital cafeteria coffee." He went to the kitchen and filled the kettle. Through the doorway, he could see Linda perched on the edge of his couch, spine straight, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a job interview. The handkerchief sat on the cushion beside her, a small ghost of Margaret's kindness. The kettle took 4 minutes to boil. James spent 3 of them staring at the calendar on his refrigerator. Ashley had sent it for Christmas, one of those glossy things with photos of national parks. March showed the Grand Canyon, all those layers of red rock and impossible depth. Margaret had wanted to visit. They'd planned a trip for their 40th anniversary. She'd died 3 months before they could book the flights. He poured hot water over 2 ginger tea bags, something Margaret used to make when the nights got cold. The steam rose between them as he carried the mugs into the living room. Linda took hers with both hands, wrapping her fingers around the ceramic like she needed the heat to prove she was still alive. They sat in silence for nearly 20 minutes. The grandfather clock in the hallway marked each minute with a soft tick, a sound James had stopped hearing years ago but noticed now in the quiet. Linda stared at the steam rising from her mug. James watched a bird land on the fence outside his window, some small brown thing he couldn't name. Finally, Linda's voice broke the stillness. "You want to know the worst part? I keep waiting to fall apart. Everyone expects me to, but I just feel empty, like I used up all my crying 2 years ago. Does that make me a terrible person?" James set his mug on the coffee table. The wood had a ring stain from where Margaret used to set her wine glass during their Friday movie nights. He'd tried to sand it out once. Ashley had stopped him. "Some marks are supposed to stay, Dad." "No, it makes you human. Margaret died in a second. You watched Michael die in slow motion. That's different." Linda's shoulders dropped half an inch. The first real breath she'd taken since arriving. 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days. That's how long Michael was sick. I know the exact number because I kept a journal. The doctor said it would help me process. But all I did was count, Days until the next chemo appointment. Days since he could walk without help. Days since he remembered my name without me reminding him. She paused, taking a sip of tea that had probably gone lukewarm. The last 6 months, he didn't even live in our bedroom anymore. We set up a hospital bed in the den because he couldn't make it up the stairs. I slept on the couch so I could hear if he needed something. Every night, I'd lie there listening to his oxygen machine. This rhythmic hiss and click, like a metronome counting down. James knew about counting. After Margaret died, he'd counted everything. Steps from the bedroom to the bathroom, cracks in the ceiling, hours until he could justify going to bed. Numbers were easier than grief. Finite, manageable. Linda set her mug down and looked directly at him for the first time since she'd arrived. I keep thinking about the funeral, everyone crying, telling me how sorry they are, and I'm standing there feeling like a fraud because mostly I just feel tired. Christopher flew in from San Francisco, and he's devastated. Actually, devastated, and I'm worried about whether I remembered to cancel Michael's physical therapy appointments. Her voice cracked on the last word, but no tears came. Does that ever go away? The guilt? James thought about the question. 3 years, and he still didn't have an answer. I don't know, but I stopped asking myself if it should. Outside, the sun had started its descent, throwing long shadows across his yard. The garden Margaret had planted was overgrown now, weeds choking out the roses she'd babied every spring. James had meant to tend it, meant to do a lot of things. Linda glanced around the room, her gaze landing on the photos covering the mantel. Margaret at 30, laughing at something off camera. Margaret and James on their wedding day, both impossibly young. Margaret holding newborn Ashley, her face a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. You haven't changed anything. It wasn't a question. No. Does it help? James considered lying, considered saying yes, that keeping everything the same kept Margaret close. But Linda had just handed him 2 years of truth. She deserved honesty in return. I thought it would. First year, I couldn't touch her stuff. Second year, I couldn't imagine touching it. Third year, I realized I wasn't keeping the room for her. I was keeping it for me. A museum to prove I'd loved someone once. Linda nodded slowly, understanding passing between them without words. Michael's shaving kit is still in the bathroom. His coffee mug is still in the cabinet, the one that says, "World's okayest husband," that I got him as a joke. I can't bring myself to pack any of it up. Christopher thinks I should donate his clothes, says it'll give me closure. Will it? I don't know. But right now, the idea of some stranger wearing Michael's flannel shirts makes me want to throw up. The grandfather clock chimed 6. Neither of them had moved except to breathe. James felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Not quite comfort, not quite connection, just the simple relief of sitting with someone who understood that grief wasn't linear, wasn't neat, wasn't something you could schedule around other people's expectations. Linda stood, smoothing her dress with hands that had probably changed countless IV bags, and held Michael's hand through God knows how many treatments. I should go. You probably have dinner to make, or whatever normal people do at 6 o'clock. James stood too. Normal. He'd forgotten what that word meant. You can come back. Tomorrow. Whenever. I'm usually here. She picked up the handkerchief from the couch, folding it carefully. Margaret gave this to me 6 years ago. I never forgot that. She didn't even know my mother. She just saw someone hurting and handed me the exact thing I needed. She looked up at James, really looked at him, and for the first time he noticed the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. You're doing the same thing right now. You know that? He didn't know how to respond to that, so he walked her to the door. She paused on the threshold, one foot inside and one out, caught between two spaces. "Thank you, James, for not telling me it'll get better, or that time heals all wounds, or any of that garbage people keep saying." He managed something close to a smile. "Time doesn't heal anything. It just teaches you to carry the weight better." She nodded and stepped into the evening. James watched her walk across his lawn toward the house she'd shared with Michael for 15 years. The house that probably still smelled like antiseptic and end-of-life care. The house she couldn't bear to be alone in. He closed the door and leaned against it, feeling something shift in his chest. For 3 years, he'd existed in a careful routine. Wake at 5, coffee on the porch. Margaret used to love oatmeal for breakfast, work in the woodshop until lunch, sandwich he didn't taste, more woodwork, dinner from a can, television he didn't watch, bed by 9, repeat until death. But tonight he'd talked to someone, really talked, not the polite exchanges at the grocery store or the obligatory conversations after church. Actual words about actual pain. He picked up the 2 mugs from the coffee table and carried them to the kitchen. As he rinsed them, he found himself thinking about tomorrow. Would Linda come back? Should he have something better than ginger tea to offer? The questions felt strange, foreign. For 3 years, tomorrow had just been today, with different light. That night, James lay in bed, staring at the ceiling crack that looked like Florida if you squinted. Margaret used to trace it with her finger, making up stories about alligators and theme parks. The memory didn't hurt quite as much as it usually did. Still hurt, just different. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Ashley. "Called 3 times. You okay?" He typed back, "Fine, was busy." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Busy doing what? You never do anything on Tuesday nights." She wasn't wrong. James had become predictable in his grief. Tuesdays, he watched whatever cooking show was on PBS and fell asleep by 8:30. Talked to a friend. The dots took longer this time. "You have friends?" He could picture her face, that mixture of hope and skepticism. Ashley had been trying to get him out of the house for 2 years. Church potlucks, woodworking classes, volunteer opportunities. He'd refused them all. Apparently. "Good. Love you, Dad. Don't stay up too late." James set the phone down and closed his eyes. Sleep didn't come easily, but for once, he didn't mind the waiting. The next day started like every other. 5 a.m., coffee, oatmeal, woodshop. He was in the middle of sanding a cabinet door when he heard the knock, different from yesterday, more confident. 3 firm raps that said she'd made a decision. Linda stood on his porch holding 2 brown paper bags from the deli 6 blocks over. She'd changed into jeans and a faded blue sweater. Her hair was pulled back again, and she wore a minimal amount of makeup that couldn't quite hide the shadows under her eyes. "I figured you probably forgot to eat lunch yesterday. Thought I'd bring something that isn't hospital food or casserole number 17. James stepped aside, and she walked in like she'd done it 100 times before. The familiarity should have felt strange. Instead, it felt inevitable. They ate on his back patio, 2 turkey sandwiches and chips neither of them had asked for, but both appreciated. The day was overcast, gray clouds pressing low, but warm enough that they didn't need jackets. Spring pretending it knew how to arrive. Linda bit into her sandwich, chewed, swallowed. "I thought I'd feel more devastated. Everyone keeps asking if I'm okay, and I keep saying yes, and they keep looking at me like I'm in shock. But I'm not. I'm just, I don't know, relieved. Is that awful to say?" James wiped mustard from the corner of his mouth. "I felt relief when Margaret died, not because I didn't love her, because watching someone you love suffer is harder than losing them. At least, death has an ending." Linda's eyes widened slightly. Not shock, recognition. Yes, exactly that. Michael was in so much pain those last months. The morphine helped, but it also took him away piece by piece. Near the end, he didn't recognize me half the time. Called me Maria once. That was his mother's name. She's been dead 20 years. A bird landed on the fence. The same small brown thing from yesterday. James still couldn't name it, but he noticed it had a white stripe on its wing. "How long were you married?" 32 years. We met when I was 26. He was a rookie cop, pulled me over for running a stop sign. I definitely ran. He gave me a warning and his phone number. I thought he was too cocky. Called him anyway. She smiled at the memory, something genuine breaking through the exhaustion. "What about you and Margaret?" 35 years. Met at a church picnic. She was serving lemonade, and I was trying to avoid my aunt, who kept introducing me to every single woman under 40. Margaret handed me a cup and said, "You look like you need rescuing." We were married 8 months later. They sat with their stories for a moment, the weight of decades settling between them like fog. Linda picked at her chips, not really eating. "Have you ever felt like you were disappearing? Like not dying, just fading?" Michael and I shared a house, but we hadn't shared a life in years. I'd try to talk to him about my day, and he'd nod along while watching his phone. We'd sit in the same room and feel miles apart. James thought about the last year with Margaret, how they'd stopped finishing each other's sentences, how conversations became logistics. "Did you pay the electric bill? What time is Ashley coming over? We need milk." The small erosions that happen so slowly you don't notice until the foundation is gone. Yeah, I felt that. Near the end, we were roommates who used to be in love. Linda looked at him, really looked, and James saw something shift in her expression. Understanding, maybe? Or just the relief of not being alone in the confession. You know what nobody tells you, that you can lose someone long before they die, that you can grieve a marriage while it's still technically alive. She set down her sandwich, appetite clearly gone. "I mourned my husband for 2 years while he was lying in a hospital bed in my den. Does that make me a terrible wife? Makes you human. And honest. Most people aren't either." They finished their lunch in comfortable silence. When Linda stood to leave, she paused at the patio door. "Can I come back tomorrow?" James nodded before he could think better of it. "Yeah, I'll be here." After she left, he cleaned up the lunch debris and returned to his woodshop. But his hands wouldn't steady on the sander. He kept thinking about what she'd said, about disappearing, about mourning something that hadn't technically died yet, about the specific loneliness of being married to someone whose body shared your space, but whose mind had already left. He'd loved Margaret, loved her still in the way you love something you've lost and can't get back. But Linda was right. They'd started losing each other years before the accident. Small distances that became chasms, date nights that became obligations, conversations that became checklists. The cabinet door in his hands was supposed to be for a bookshelf Ashley had requested. He'd started it 6 months ago. Still hadn't finished. Couldn't seem to make his hands complete anything anymore. His phone rang. "Ashley." "Hey, Dad? Just checking in. You sounded weird last night." "I'm fine. You keep saying that, but your voice sounds different." James set down the sander, brushing sawdust from his jeans. "A friend's been coming by. Lost her husband last week." Ashley went quiet. Background noise filtered through. The ambient sounds of a Chicago office. Keyboards clicking, someone laughing in another room. "Wait, you have a friend? Like an actual person you're spending time with voluntarily?" Don't sound so surprised. Dad, you haven't spent time with anyone outside of mandatory church functions in 3 years. This is surprise-worthy. She's grieving. I know what that's like. That's all it is. But Ashley had inherited Margaret's ability to hear what people weren't saying. What's her name? Linda. Linda Martinez. She lives next door. The Martinez family, with the husband who had cancer. Had. Past tense. He died Sunday. Oh, God. And she's okay? James thought about Linda's admission yesterday. The guilt, the exhaustion, the complicated relief. No, but she's managing. We both are. More silence. Then, carefully, are you two? James cut her off before she could finish the thought. No, nothing like that. We're just two people who understand what it's like to lose someone, that's all. Okay. Ashley's tone suggested she didn't quite believe him, but she let it go. I'm glad, Dad. Really, you need people, even if it's just someone to sit in silence with. They talked for a few more minutes about nothing important. Ashley's work, the weather in Chicago, whether she'd be able to visit next month. The normal conversation of a father and daughter who'd learned to dance around the grief that had reshaped both their lives. After he hung up, James stood in his workshop, surrounded by half-finished projects, and tried to name what he was feeling. Not happiness, not even close, but maybe the beginning of something that wasn't pure emptiness, a small light at the bottom of a very deep well. Linda came back the next day, and the day after that, each time with some excuse. Brought coffee from the shop downtown, needed help reaching something on a high shelf in her garage, wanted his opinion on whether to keep or donate Michael's tools. On the fourth day, she showed up empty-handed. I don't have a reason today. I just didn't want to be in that house. James poured her tea without asking. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm, this new routine of shared silence and careful honesty. They sat in his living room, and Linda tucked her feet under her on the couch. Something about the gesture felt young, almost girlish. A glimpse of who she might have been before caretaking became her entire identity. Christopher called this morning. He's going back to San Francisco tomorrow. Says I should come with him for a few weeks. Get away from the house. You going to? No. Running away won't change anything. The house will still smell like hospital when I get back. Michael's coffee mug will still be in the cabinet. The grief will still be there, just with jet lag. James understood. After Margaret died, Ashley had wanted him to move to Chicago. Stay with her, get a fresh start, leave the memories behind. But memories weren't tied to places. They lived in your bones. Linda picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion. I keep thinking about what you said, about time not healing anything, just teaching you to carry the weight. Is that really all there is? Just learning to exist with this permanent ache? The question hung between them, heavy with all the implications neither wanted to examine too closely. James chose his words carefully. I think maybe it's about learning to let the ache take up less space. Not gone, just smaller, room for other things eventually. Linda's eyes met his, and something passed between them. Not attraction exactly, more like recognition. Two people who'd been drowning, finding out they could still remember how to tread water. Her hand rested on the couch cushion between them. Without thinking, without planning, James reached over and covered it with his own. The touch lasted maybe 3 seconds, long enough for both of them to notice, long enough for it to mean something. Linda pulled back first, standing quickly. I should go. I'm keeping you from your work. She moved toward the door, and James followed. On the threshold, she turned back. Same time tomorrow? He nodded, and she left. But this time, James watched her walk all the way to her door, watched her pause with her hand on the knob, shoulders rising and falling with a deep breath before she went inside. That night, James couldn't sleep. He lay in bed thinking about Linda's hand under his. Such a small thing, barely contact, but it had felt like waking up after a long, dreamless sleep. Not comfortable, disorienting, but undeniably real. His phone buzzed. Linda. Thank you for today. I know this is probably weird. Two grieving people spending all their time together, but it helps. You help. He stared at the message for a full minute before typing back. Not weird, or if it is, I don't care. See you tomorrow. 3 dots appeared immediately. You know what Christopher said before he left? He said I should be careful, that people will talk if I'm not respectful of the mourning period, whatever that means. James's jaw tightened. He'd heard similar from people at church. Well-meaning comments about taking time, not rushing, being mindful of appearances, as if grief could be scheduled like a dentist appointment. What did you tell him? I told him I've been mourning for 2 years. I'm done asking permission to feel something other than sad. James read the message 3 times, each word a small declaration of independence from other people's timelines and expectations. Good. Another message. He asked if something was happening between us. I told him no. Was I lying? The question sat on his screen, cursor blinking, demanding an answer he didn't have. I don't know. Are we? The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I don't know either. But I know I feel less alone when I'm sitting on your couch than I have in 2 years. Is that enough for now? Yeah, that's enough. He set the phone down and turned toward Margaret's side of the bed. The sheets were still the ones they'd used together. He'd washed them countless times, but never replaced them. Another piece of the museum. I'm sorry, he whispered to the empty space. I don't know what I'm doing. The room offered no absolution, no permission, just the familiar shadows and the grandfather clock marking another minute past. The next morning, James woke to find a casserole dish on his porch, chicken and rice, still warm, with a note in Shirley Thompson's handwriting. Saw your neighbor has been spending a lot of time at your house. Just wanted to check that you're eating properly. Let me know if you need anything. Shirley. The words were kind. The implication wasn't. James had lived in this neighborhood for 38 years, long enough to know that "let me know if you need anything" could also mean "I'm watching" and "I'm concerned." He brought the casserole inside and called Deacon William Harris. If Shirley had noticed, others had too. Better to hear it from a friend first. William answered on the 3rd ring, voice warm with decades of friendship. Brother James, was just thinking about you. How are you holding up? I'm okay. Listen, I need to ask you something. Have people been talking? A pause. In that silence, James had his answer. What kind of talking? The Linda Martinez kind. William sighed, the sound of a man who'd been a spiritual counselor long enough to recognize a minefield when he saw one. Shirley called yesterday. She's worried about you. Says you've had a visitor every day this week. Says it doesn't look right, this soon after Brother Michael's passing. James's grip tightened on the phone. We're friends, 2 people who understand what losing someone feels like. That's all. I believe you, James. I do. But you know how people are, especially in our community. Appearances matter, fair or not. So what am I supposed to do? Tell Linda she can't come over because it might make the church ladies uncomfortable? William's voice gentled, the tone he used when delivering difficult truths. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what's already happening. People are talking, and if it continues, those whispers are going to get louder. You need to be prepared for that, both of you. James thanked him and hung up. He stood in his kitchen, holding a casserole from a woman who'd known him for 4 decades, but couldn't see past the optics of grief to the reality of two people just trying to survive. When Linda arrived that afternoon, he told her about the call. She listened without interrupting, her face carefully neutral. So what? We stopped seeing each other because it makes Shirley Thompson uncomfortable. I don't know, but William's right. People are going to talk? Could get ugly. Linda set down her coffee cup with more force than necessary. Let me tell you what ugly is, James. Ugly is spending 2 years watching your husband forget how to swallow. Ugly is changing adult diapers and pretending it doesn't break your heart every single time. Ugly is sitting in a funeral home picking out a casket while someone asks if you want the premium lining or standard. Her voice had risen, color flooding her cheeks. Some church lady being scandalized that I'm drinking coffee with you? That's not ugly. That's just people with too much time and not enough actual problems. James had never seen her angry before. It looked good on her. Real. Like she'd finally stopped performing the role of the perfect, grieving widow. You're right. Damn right I'm right. She grabbed her purse, movements sharp with frustration. I'm going home. Not because I'm scared of gossip, because I'm tired and I need to sleep in my own bed for once. She made it to the door before James spoke. For once? Linda froze, hand on the doorknob. I've been sleeping on your couch. The guest room in my house still smells like medicine. I can't do it, so I come here, drink tea, wait until you go to bed, and sleep on your couch. Then I leave before you wake up. James processed this information slowly. The blanket that had appeared folded on the couch, the pillow he'd assumed he'd left there himself, the faint scent of her shampoo he'd noticed but couldn't place. How long? 3 nights now. She turned to face him, chin lifted in defiance. If you want me to stop, say so, but don't ask me to stop because of what Shirley Thompson thinks. James looked at this woman who'd spent 2 years watching her husband die, who'd held herself together through a funeral while drowning inside, who'd found enough courage to knock on a stranger's door because silence had become unbearable. I don't want you to stop. Linda's shoulders dropped, tension bleeding out. Good, because I don't think I can. That evening, James pulled sheets from the linen closet and made up the guest room properly. When Linda arrived after dinner, he showed her the room. Fresh towels on the dresser, window cracked for air, lamp on the nightstand. You don't have to sleep on the couch. Her eyes welled up, but still no tears fell. Thank you. She closed the door, and James went to his own room. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel like he was the only person in the house. The knowledge should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like relief. Around midnight, he heard her door open, soft footsteps in the hallway. He found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table in the dark. Can't sleep? She shook her head. Too quiet. Isn't that stupid? I came here because my house was too quiet, and now this house is too quiet too. James sat across from her. The moonlight through the window painted everything in shades of gray. Margaret used to talk in her sleep. Just mumbles, nothing coherent. But after she died, the silence kept me up for months. I'd lie there listening for her voice and hearing nothing. Linda traced patterns on the table with her finger. Michael snored loudly. I used to complain about it, joke that I needed earplugs. Now I'd give anything to hear it again. They sat in the shared darkness, two people learning that grief was full of these small ironies, the things that annoyed you becoming the things you missed most. Want some tea? Linda smiled, just barely. Is that your solution to everything? Worked so far. He made chamomile this time, and they drank it slowly while the house settled around them. Outside, a car passed. A dog barked in the distance. Normal sounds of a normal night in a normal neighborhood where two abnormal people were trying to figure out how to keep breathing. "Tomorrow's Sunday," Linda said. "Are you going to church?" "Planning on it." "Me too. Christopher thinks I should skip. Says people will stare." "They will." Linda met his eyes over her mug. "Let them." The next morning, James put on his Navy suit and drove to First Baptist Church, same as he had every Sunday for 40 years. Linda followed in her own car, and they walked in separately, maintaining the fiction of coincidence. But people noticed. Of course they noticed. Shirley Thompson's eyes tracked them from the parking lot to their separate pews. Deacon William gave James a significant look that said, "I told you so." Even Pastor Reynolds stumbled briefly in his sermon when he saw them both in attendance. After the service, James stood in the fellowship hall with weak coffee and stale donuts, fielding condolences and thinly veiled questions. "Good to see you out, Brother James." Shirley appeared at his elbow, smile fixed and eyes calculating. "I see Sister Linda is here too. How is she holding up? You could ask her yourself. She's right over there." Shirley's smile tightened. "Of course. It's just, well, people have noticed you two have been spending time together. Some folks are concerned it might be premature." James set down his coffee cup. "Premature for what, exactly?" Shirley glanced around, making sure no one was listening too closely. "You know how it looks, James. Her husband barely in the ground, and she's at your house every day. People talk. Let them talk." Her eyebrows rose. "I'm trying to help you. Both of you. This could become a scandal if you're not careful." James felt something harden in his chest. 3 years of grief, 3 years of walking on eggshells around everyone else's comfort. 3 years of performing the role of the bereaved widower who stayed safely frozen in acceptable sadness. You want to help? Then stop policing how other people grieve. Linda and I aren't doing anything wrong. We're just two people trying to remember what it's like to not feel dead inside. Shirley's expression shifted from concern to disapproval. "Well, I can see you've made up your mind. I'll pray for you both." She walked away, spine rigid with righteousness. James felt eyes on him from around the room, conversations that paused when he looked in their direction. The slow spread of gossip through a community that had nothing better to do on a Sunday morning than judge two people for seeking comfort in each other's company. Linda appeared at his side, her own coffee cup clutched like a shield. That looked intense. "Shirley thinks we're scandalous." Linda snorted softly. "If this is scandalous, their lives must be incredibly boring." They stood together, a unified front against the whispers, and James felt something shift. Not love, not yet, but maybe the foundation of something that could become it. Partnership, understanding, the simple knowledge that someone else saw you as you were and didn't ask you to be anything else. Deacon William approached, his expression more sympathetic than Shirley's, but still concerned. "Can we talk? Privately?" James nodded and followed him to a small office off the main hall. Linda waited outside, her presence a quiet support. William closed the door and leaned against the desk. "People are uncomfortable, James. The elders have been getting calls. They're asking me to talk to you." "About what? Having a friend? About the optics? I know it's not fair, but fair doesn't matter when the congregation is talking." James felt anger rising, hot and unfamiliar. "So, what do they want? For me to tell Linda she can't come to my house anymore? For us to pretend we don't know each other? They want you to be mindful, to give it time. Time for what?" William sighed, and James saw the conflict in his old friend's eyes. The man who'd stood by him at Margaret's funeral, who'd checked in every week for 3 years, who'd never once judged the depth of James's grief or the length of his isolation. "I don't have a good answer, brother. I'm just the messenger." "Then tell them the message was delivered, and tell them I'm not changing anything." James opened the door and walked out. Linda fell into step beside him, and they left the church together. In the parking lot, Ashley called. James answered, putting her on speaker. "Dad, I just got off the phone with Mrs. Thompson. She says you're dating the neighbor whose husband just died, and that the whole church is talking about it." James looked at Linda. She looked back, eyebrows raised in question. "We're not dating. We're friends." That's not what she made it sound like. "Ashley, I'm 62 years old. I don't need permission from church gossips to have a friend." Silence on the other end. Then, "I know that. I just don't want you to get hurt, or for people to make things difficult for you." Linda spoke up. "Ashley, this is Linda. Your dad's been incredibly kind to me during a really difficult time. I hope that doesn't cause problems for him, but I'm not going to stop coming around just because it makes some people uncomfortable." More silence. James could practically hear Ashley recalibrating. "Okay, as long as you both know what you're doing." "We don't," James admitted, "but we're figuring it out." After they hung up, Linda leaned against her car. "This is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it?" "Probably. Are you okay with that?" James thought about Shirley's disapproval, about the whispers, about the fact that his own daughter had received calls, thought about the alternative, going back to his empty house, his museum of grief, his careful routine of existing without living. "Yeah, I'm okay with it." Linda smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her that didn't carry the weight of performance. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." They drove home separately, maintaining the fiction even as everyone had already drawn their conclusions. But when they got back to the neighborhood, Linda followed James into his house without hesitation. They made lunch together, moving around the kitchen with growing familiarity, small intimacies of shared space. "You want mustard? Can you reach that plate?" "Here, let me get that." After they ate, Linda looked at James across the table. "I need to tell you something." He waited. "I don't know what this is. Us, I mean. But it scares me, not because of what people think, because I don't know if I'm ready for it. Whatever it is." James understood. He felt it too. This pull toward something new when the old grief hadn't finished with them yet. "Then we don't name it. We just let it be whatever it needs to be. And if it becomes something more, then we deal with that when it happens." Linda reached across the table. This time, when their hands touched, neither pulled away. "Okay. No names, no labels. Just this. Just this," James agreed. Outside, Shirley Thompson walked past with her dog, glancing at James's house with barely concealed interest. Let her look. Let them all look. For the first time in 3 years, James Robinson was doing something other than counting days until he could justify going to bed. He was living. Messy, complicated, probably too soon by everyone else's standards, but living nonetheless. And that, he thought, watching Linda gather plates, humming softly to herself, was enough. Monday morning started with silence. James stood in his workshop at 5:30, the sun not yet clearing the horizon, sanding a drawer pull he'd shaped 3 times already. His hands moved without thought, muscle memory filling the hours before Linda would arrive. She'd stayed in the guest room again last night. 4th time this week. The arrangement had stopped feeling temporary and started feeling like a decision neither of them had consciously made. His phone rang at 6:15. Unknown number. "Mr. Robinson?" The voice was male, younger, tight with controlled fury. "This is Christopher Martinez, Linda's son. We need to talk." James set down the sandpaper, dusting his hands on his jeans. "All right. My mother has been staying at your house, sleeping there. Neighbors have been calling me, sending me pictures. My father died 10 days ago, and she's practically moved in with you. What the hell is going on?" Through the workshop window, James could see Linda's house. Lights off, her car in the driveway, but he knew she was down the hall from where he'd slept, using his shower, wearing one of his old t-shirts to bed, because her own pajamas still smelled like hospital laundry detergent. Your mother needed somewhere that didn't remind her of IVs and morphine pumps. "I have a guest room. She's using it." "Just the guest room?" The implication landed like a fist. "Yes, just the guest room." Christopher's laugh came sharp and bitter. "You know what this looks like, right? Dad barely cold and Mom shacked up with the neighbor. Do you have any idea how people are talking? I don't care how it looks." "Well, you should, because I'm flying back this weekend, and the three of us are going to have a conversation about appropriate behavior and respect for my father's memory." The line went dead. James stood holding the phone, watching morning light creep across his workbench. Appropriate behavior, as if grief came with an instruction manual and a timeline printed on the back. When Linda knocked 20 minutes later, he was making coffee. She'd stopped using her own front door days ago, just came straight to his. Another small erosion of pretense. She wore jeans and a gray sweater, hair damp from the shower, face makeup-free. In the week and a half since Michael's funeral, she'd stopped performing grooming rituals that no longer mattered. Mourning, she kissed his cheek without thinking, then froze, realizing what she'd done. "Sorry." That was automatic. "Don't be sorry." But the moment had shifted something, made them both aware of how domestic this had become. Coffee together, her toothbrush in his bathroom, the easy intimacy of shared space and comfortable silence. James poured 2 mugs, adding the exact amount of cream she preferred without asking. Christopher called. Linda's shoulders tensed. "What did he say?" "That he's coming back this weekend, wants to talk to all of us about appropriate behavior." She took her mug, gripping it tighter than necessary. "He thinks we're sleeping together. Are we?" The question hung between them, more serious than James had intended. "You know what I mean. He thinks we're having an affair, that I'm dishonoring Michael by being here." "And what do you think?" Linda moved to the window, staring out at her own house like it belonged to someone else. "I think Michael and I stopped having a marriage worth honoring years ago. I think I've been a widow emotionally since before he got sick. I think coming here is the only thing keeping me from swallowing a bottle of sleeping pills." She turned back, eyes fierce. "Does that make me a terrible person? That I'm relieved he's dead? That I sleep better in your guest room than I have in my own bed in 5 years?" James crossed to her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence. "It makes you honest. Honest doesn't pay bills or satisfy angry sons. Then maybe Christopher needs to hear the truth about his parents' marriage." Linda laughed, sharp and humorless. "Oh, I'm sure that'll go over great. Sorry, honey, but your father and I were basically strangers who shared a mortgage. By the way, he was writing love letters to another woman 4 years ago." "What?" Linda set down her mug, jaw tight. "Found them yesterday, going through his office for tax documents. 27 letters to someone named Maria Gonzalez in Albuquerque. Never sent, but written, detailed, about how our marriage was suffocating him, how he wished he had the courage to leave." "Jesus." "Yeah." She picked up her mug again, hands shaking slightly. "So before Christopher lectures me about honoring his father's memory, maybe he should know what that memory actually was." They drank their coffee in heavy silence. Outside, A garbage truck rumbled past. Normal Monday morning in a normal neighborhood where nothing was normal anymore. You going to tell him? I don't know. Part of me wants to shove those letters in his face and say, this is who your father really was. But that feels cruel, like I'm destroying his image of his dad just to justify myself. You're not justifying anything. You're surviving. Linda's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, expression hardening. Speak of the devil. She answered, voice careful. Hi, Christopher. James could hear the raised voice through the speaker, couldn't make out words but caught the tone, accusatory, angry. I'm aware people have been calling you? Yes, I've been at James's house. No, it's not what you think. More shouting. Christopher, stop. Just stop. Your father wouldn't want this. The voice got louder. Linda's face flushed, anger replacing careful diplomacy. Don't you dare tell me what Dad deserves. I spent 2 years crushing his pills because he couldn't swallow, changing catheters, holding his hand while he begged for morphine because the pain was so bad. I earned the right to decide how I grieve. She hung up without waiting for response, phone shaking in her hand. I've never done that, never hung up on him. Maybe you should have done it sooner. She looked at James, eyes bright with unshed tears that still wouldn't fall. He's right, though. Everyone's right. It's too soon. People are talking, and we're making it worse. James took her hand, the gesture automatic now. If you go home right now, sleep in your own bed, stop coming here, will any of it hurt less? No. Will Christopher's judgment change? No. Will Michael be any less dead? Her breath caught. No. Then what's the point of performing grief the way everyone expects? Before Linda could answer, his doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass, James recognized Deacon William's silhouette. He opened the door to find his oldest friend holding a manila folder, expression grim as a pallbearer. Brother James, Sister Linda, we need to talk. They sat in the living room, William in the armchair, James and Linda deliberately on opposite ends of the couch. The physical distance felt performative but necessary. William opened the folder, pulling out printed emails. The elders met last night. Emergency session. 17 complaints have come in about you two, some anonymous, most signed. He spread the papers on the coffee table like evidence at trial. James picked up the top sheet. Shirley Thompson's name jumped out, along with bullet points documenting every time Linda's car had been spotted at his house. Times, dates, duration of visits, photographic evidence attached. She's been surveilling us. William's face showed regret, but no surprise. She believes she's protecting the church's moral standing. From what? 2 people drinking tea? The deacon pulled out another email, this one with multiple signatures. From the appearance of impropriety. Sister Linda's husband has been deceased for 10 days. You're a widower of 3 years. The optics of her staying here overnight multiple times are causing families to question the church's values. Linda's voice came flat, emotionless. What exactly do you want us to do? William closed his eyes briefly, and James saw the toll this was taking. The elders are requesting that you limit contact, maintain separate residences, at least until a more appropriate period has passed. How long is appropriate? I don't have that answer. James stood, decades of quiet compliance cracking. You stood at Margaret's grave and told me to lean on my church family, that I wasn't alone. Where was that family the last 3 years while I sat in this house, wondering if getting out of bed was worth the effort? William, I built the fellowship hall with my own hands. I taught Sunday school for 12 years. I never missed a service until Margaret died. And now you're here telling me I can't have a friend because her husband died 10 days ago instead of 10 years. Brother James, don't Brother James me. Linda knocked on my door, and I felt human for the first time since the accident. If the church can't understand that, if they'd rather I go back to being safely, acceptably miserable, then maybe I don't need that family. William stood too, his own frustrations surfacing. I'm trying to protect you, both of you. This kind of gossip turns vicious. Reputations get destroyed. Linda laughed bitterly. Our reputations are already destroyed, William. Mine is woman whose husband just died. His is man whose wife died years ago. God forbid we try to be anything else. The deacon gathered his papers, defeat settling over his shoulders. I've delivered the message. What you do with it is your decision. But I hope you'll pray about this. After he left, James and Linda sat in silence. The grandfather clock marked seconds with indifferent precision. Maybe they're right. Linda's voice came small. Maybe we should stop. Is that what you want? I'm tired, James. Tired of defending myself to Christopher. Tired of being watched by Shirley Thompson. Tired of everyone having an opinion on how I should feel. Then stop defending. Just live. Easy for you to say. Your daughter isn't flying across the country to stage an intervention. No, she's just calling every night worried I've lost my mind. We're both under scrutiny. Question is whether we let it determine how we live. Linda leaned into him, just her shoulder touching his. I went to Michael's grave yesterday, told him about all this, about you, the church, Christopher, asked what I should do. What did he say? Nothing, obviously, but I remembered something. Last year, when he could still watch TV, we saw some movie. Couple got together right after one of them lost a spouse. I said it was unrealistic. Michael said, "Why? If you're drowning and someone throws you a rope, you don't ask if it's been the appropriate amount of time since the last rope. You grab it." James processed this, another layer of Michael Martinez revealing itself posthumously. Sounds like he would have understood. Or I'm telling myself that to feel less guilty. That evening, Linda went home. First time in 4 days she'd slept in her own house. She needed clothes, needed to face those rooms eventually, needed to prove she could still walk through them without collapsing. She returned 2 hours later, carrying a cardboard box, face pale but composed. Found these. She set the box on his kitchen table. Inside were envelopes, dozens of them, addressed to Maria Gonzalez, Albuquerque, New Mexico, all in Michael's handwriting, all opened as if he'd written them, sealed them, then opened them again to reread what he couldn't bring himself to send. You read them, every single one. She pulled one out, unfolding it with steady hands. Maria, when I'm with you, I remember who I was before the badge, before the mortgage, before the slow suffocation of a marriage that died somewhere between our 10th anniversary and our 20th. With Linda, I'm a ghost. With you, I'm alive. Her voice remained clinical, detached. 27 letters spanning 6 months. Then nothing. Either he ended it or she did. Either way, this is what my marriage actually was. Did you know? That he was unhappy? That we both were? Yes. That he was actively planning to leave? No. James felt anger on her behalf, then recognized his own hypocrisy. His marriage to Margaret hadn't been perfect either. Different problems, same slow erosion. What are you going to do with them? Linda closed the box carefully. Show Christopher. So he stops putting his father on a pedestal, so he understands why I'm not devastated. So maybe he'll get off my back about you. She looked at James directly. Does this change anything? Knowing Michael was unfaithful? Emotionally unfaithful, James corrected. We don't know if they actually... Does it matter? He checked out of our marriage years ago. I've been mourning it ever since. Finding these just proves I wasn't imagining things. She picked up the box like evidence for trial. When Christopher gets here this weekend, he's going to hear the truth. All of it. Friday afternoon, Christopher's rental car appeared in Linda's driveway. James watched from his window as mother and son embraced stiffly, Christopher's body language radiating judgment even from a distance. An hour later, Linda texted, "Come over. Time to face this." James crossed the lawn feeling like he was walking to his own execution. Christopher answered the door, and James got his first real look at the son. Early 30s, expensive suit even on casual Friday, the kind of polished professional who probably had strong opinions about craft coffee and disruption. "Mr. Robinson." "Christopher." Their handshake was brief, formal, hostile. Inside, Linda sat at the kitchen table, the box of letters in front of her like a shield. Her expression was calm, but James recognized the tension in her shoulders. Christopher gestured to a chair. "Please sit. Let's have an adult conversation about what's happening here." The condescension made James's jaw clench, but he sat. Christopher remained standing, arms crossed, positioning himself as authority figure. "Mom, I love you, but this situation is inappropriate. Dad's been dead 10 days and you're already moving on. It's disrespectful to him, to his memory, to our family." Linda pushed the box across the table. "Before you lecture me about respecting your father's memory, read these." Christopher frowned, opening the box. He pulled out the first letter, scanned it, then the second. Color drained from his face. "What is this? Evidence that the marriage you're worried about me dishonoring ended years before your father died." Christopher read several more letters, hands starting to shake. He was having an affair? Wanted to. I don't know if they ever actually met. The letters stop after 6 months, but he was done with our marriage 4 years ago. He just didn't have the courage to actually leave. Christopher sank into a chair, letters scattered around him like shrapnel. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know. Found them 3 days ago looking for tax documents. But even if I had known, what would I have said? That your father was miserable? That I was miserable? That we'd been performing marriage for half a decade? All those visits, you both seemed fine. We were good at fine, good at pretending. That's what you do when you've been married 32 years and don't know how else to be." Christopher picked up another letter, reading it with visible pain. "I thought you two were happy. I thought you had what I wanted someday." Linda reached across the table. Christopher pulled back. "We were happy once. Your father and I loved each other very much for many years. But people change. Marriages change. Sometimes they die while both people are still alive." "So you'd already checked out." She flinched, but didn't deny it. "I mourned your father for 2 years while he was sick. Mourned who we used to be. Mourned the marriage we'd lost. By the time he actually died, I had nothing left." Christopher stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Pastor Reynolds called me. Said there were concerns about your behavior, about staying at Mr. Robinson's house. Asked if I could intervene." James spoke for the first time. "And what did you tell him?" "That I'd handle it, that I'd make sure my mother wasn't destroying Dad's reputation. Your father destroyed his own reputation." Linda's voice went hard. "Those letters prove he was just as unhappy as I was. Difference is, I didn't go looking for someone else while he was still alive." The accusation hung between them. Christopher absorbed it, worldview visibly cracking. "Did Dad know? About you and Mr. Robinson? There was no me and Mr. Robinson when your father was alive. Just a neighbor I said hello to sometimes. But he saw something." Christopher turned from the window. "That's what this is about. He saw you looking at James differently." James chose truth over comfort. "Your father told Deacon William to make sure your mother kept living after he was gone. Specifically told him not to let her lock herself away. Maybe he understood better than you're giving him credit for." Christopher processed this, information colliding with assumptions. "I need air." He walked out, leaving them alone with the scattered evidence of a marriage that had ended in stages. Linda gathered the letters mechanically. That went about as well as expected. Did you expect different? I hoped for something less nuclear. They cleaned up in silence. Outside, Christopher sat in his rental car, head in hands, trying to reconcile the father he'd known with the man who'd written those letters. Eventually, he came back inside, eyes red but dry. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. Need to process, but I want to ask you both something. He looked at James directly. Do you love my mother? The question demanded honesty James wasn't sure he possessed. I don't know. I know when she's around, I don't feel like I'm just waiting to die. I know I sleep better knowing she's down the hall. I know hearing her laugh makes something in my chest loosen. If that's love, maybe. If it's something else, I can't name it yet. Christopher turned to Linda. And you? I don't know either, but I know I'm not ready to give it up. Her son nodded slowly, processing. Okay, I don't understand it. I think it's too fast, and it's going to blow up in your faces. But I can see you're not stopping. No, we're not. Then be smart. The church is watching. People are talking. Don't hand them more ammunition. After Christopher left, Linda collapsed onto the couch. Hardest conversation of my life. You told the truth when lying would have been easier. She leaned back, closing her eyes. You know what kills me? I spent 10 days feeling guilty about Michael. Guilty I wasn't sadder. Guilty about you. Guilty about everything. And the whole time he'd emotionally divorced me years ago. Just didn't have the guts to make it legal. Does knowing that help? Makes me feel stupid for wasting guilt on someone who stopped being my husband before cancer even started. That night, they sat on James's back patio, watching darkness settle. Linda wore one of his old sweatshirts, sleeves hanging past her hands, looking younger and more vulnerable than James had seen her. Tomorrow, I'm calling a realtor. He turned to her, surprised. For what? To sell the house. I can't build a future in a building full of past I don't want. She pulled the sweatshirt tighter. Michael left me enough money to start over, so that's what I'm doing. Where will you go? Depends. On what? On whether you'd consider selling yours too. James absorbed the implication, the future being sketched in real time. And if I would, then maybe we find something together, something that isn't haunted. That's a big step. Linda met his eyes. So is everything else we've been doing. Might as well be honest about it. James thought about his house. Margaret's embroidered towels, her novels on the shelves, the museum he'd maintained for 3 years. Ashley would have opinions. Ashley's 35 and lives in Chicago. This is your life, not hers. You're right. He moved to the railing, Linda joining him. We really doing this? Moving in together after knowing each other, really knowing each other, for 10 days? Apparently, people are going to lose their minds. Let them. James turned to face her fully. Are we in love? She considered the question seriously. I think we're in survival, and survival looks a lot like love when you're drowning. Is that enough? For now? Yes. She leaned up and kissed him, not tentative like before, but decisive, claiming something she'd decided belonged to her. When they pulled apart, Linda rested her forehead against his chest. I'm terrified. This could be a massive mistake. James held her against the uncertainty. Probably. But I'd rather make mistakes while living than play it safe while dying. His phone rang. Ashley. Right on schedule. Hey, sweetie. Dad, you sound different. What happened? He looked at Linda in his arms, both of them standing at the edge of something terrifying and necessary. I made some decisions about moving forward, about admitting your mother and I had problems we never fixed, about accepting that living doesn't mean betraying the dead. Are you selling the house? How'd you know? Because that house is a museum, and you're not a curator. You're 62, and you deserve to actually live. When did you get so wise? I've been trying to tell you for 3 years. You finally ready to listen? Yeah, I think I am. After they hung up, Linda looked at him. She took that well, better than expected. Tomorrow starts the hard part. Packing, realtors, finding a place, people judging every step. James covered her hands with his. Let them judge. Time to write our own rules. They went inside, and for the first time, Linda didn't go to the guest room immediately. She sat on the couch with a blanket while James read in the armchair. Comfortable silence, the quiet intimacy of two people who didn't need constant conversation. Around 10, Linda's phone buzzed. Deacon William. Elders voted, 4-3. They're asking you both to step back from leadership, but not leave the congregation. Elder Mitchell fought for you, said some things that needed saying. Linda showed James the message. How do you feel? Relieved, honestly. I'll miss being a deacon, but I won't miss defending my grief to committees. Think we'll stay at First Baptist? Linda considered. Maybe not. Might be easier to find somewhere we're not on trial every Sunday. Fresh Start became their operating principle, a promise and a plan. They sat until Linda's eyes started closing. James walked her to the guest room, hesitating at the threshold. You know, you don't have to sleep here if you don't want. Where else would I sleep? I mean, we could. Linda smiled, understanding. One step at a time, James. We're moving fast enough. You're right. She kissed his cheek. But ask me again in a month, when we have our own place, when we've had time to figure out what we actually are. Deal. James went to his room, climbed into bed that still felt too big. Tomorrow, they'd start dismantling museums. Tomorrow, they'd call realtors. Tomorrow, they'd take another step toward whatever future they were building. But tonight, knowing Linda was down the hall, choosing to be there, felt like the first real breath in 3 years. The grandfather clock chimed 11. In the guest room, Linda's light went off. Around the neighborhood, people probably texted gossip and predicted disaster. Let them. James and Linda were too busy learning to survive to care what anyone thought about their methods. Grief wasn't a schedule or a performance. It was messy and personal, and sometimes looked like two broken people deciding that broken together beat drowning alone. And if that scandalized congregations and disappointed children, so be it. They'd earned the right to choose survival. Now came the living part, scary and uncertain, and probably too soon, but real. After years of pretending, real felt like revolution. Sunday morning arrived with the weight of execution day. James stood in his bedroom, buttoning a white shirt he'd last worn to Margaret's funeral. His hands moved mechanically, muscle memory from decades of preparing for church. But this felt different, final. Linda had gone home to change, promising to meet him in the parking lot. They'd agreed to arrive separately, one last concession to optics that probably didn't matter anymore. The congregation had already decided what they were. Today was just formality. The drive to First Baptist took 8 minutes. James had made this trip thousands of times, knew every stop sign and speed bump, but today the familiar route felt like driving toward a cliff edge, knowing the fall was coming, but unable to turn around. Linda's car was already there when he pulled in. She stood by the entrance in a simple navy dress, hair pulled back, no jewelry except her wedding ring. She hadn't taken it off yet. Neither had James. They walked in together, shoulders almost touching, but not quite. The sanctuary was packed, more people than usual for a regular service. Word had spread. The faithful had come to witness judgment. Shirley Thompson sat in the third row, back straight, hands folded primly in her lap. She nodded to James with something that might have been sympathy or satisfaction. Hard to tell which. Deacon William stood near the altar, talking quietly with Pastor Reynolds. When he saw James and Linda, his expression tightened with what looked like genuine regret. He'd tried to warn them. They hadn't listened. James and Linda took seats in the back, the prodigals returning for sentencing. Around them, conversations dropped to whispers. Heads turned. Phones appeared. People texting updates to those who couldn't make it. Modern-day Pharisees documenting the fall. Pastor Reynolds began the service with a prayer that felt pointed. Lord, help us to honor those we've lost with dignity and respect. Help us to remember that grief, while personal, also affects our community. Guide us in maintaining standards that reflect your word. The sermon was from Ecclesiastes. There is a time for everything, a season for every activity under heaven. Reynolds lingered on that word. Season. The implication was clear. There were appropriate seasons for mourning, appropriate seasons for moving forward. James and Linda had confused the calendar. After the sermon, Reynolds cleared his throat. Before we close, the elders have asked to address a matter of congregational concern. James Robinson, Linda Martinez, would you please come forward? The sanctuary went silent. Even the children seemed to sense the gravity, their usual fidgeting stilled. James stood first. Linda followed. They walked the aisle together, that long march to the front, where they'd both been baptized, where they'd both married their first spouses, where they'd both said goodbye to people they'd loved. 5 elders sat in chairs facing the congregation. James knew them all, had served alongside 3 of them, had built 2 of them bookshelves for their home offices. Relationships forged over decades, now brought to this. Elder Marcus Thompson, Shirley's husband, spoke first. Brother James, Sister Linda, we've called you here today because of concerns raised by multiple church members regarding your conduct in the wake of Brother Michael's passing. He consulted notes, reading from prepared remarks. It has been observed that Sister Linda has been staying at Brother James's residence regularly, sometimes overnight. This has created the appearance of impropriety and has caused distress within our congregation. Several families have expressed discomfort with this situation continuing. Linda's voice came out steady, stronger than James expected. May I speak? Elder Thompson hesitated, then nodded. Linda stepped forward slightly, addressing the entire sanctuary rather than just the elders. You're right. I have been staying at James's house, sleeping in his guest room because my own bedroom still smells like death and medicine, because I spent 2 years watching my husband fade and I can't bear to lie in that bed alone yet. Her voice didn't waver. But before you judge me for dishonoring Michael's memory, you should know something about the marriage you're so worried about protecting. She reached into her purse and pulled out one of Michael's letters, unfolded it, read aloud. Maria, when I'm with you, I remember who I was before the badge, before the mortgage, before the slow suffocation of a marriage that died somewhere between our 10th anniversary and our 20th. Gasps rippled through the sanctuary. Shirley Thompson's hand flew to her mouth. Linda continued, voice gaining strength. My husband wrote 27 letters to another woman 4 years ago. Letters where he confessed he'd stopped loving me, where he talked about leaving, where he described our marriage as suffocation. She folded the letter carefully. I didn't know about these until 2 days ago, but they explain a lot. Why we slept in separate rooms, why he stopped touching me, why the last real conversation we had was about whether to get the gutters cleaned. Elder Thompson tried to interject. Sister Linda, this is... No. You brought me here to confess, so let me confess. I mourned my marriage for 5 years while Michael was still alive. By the time cancer killed him, I'd already cried every tear I had. So yes, I turned to James, because he understood what it's like to lose someone years before they actually die. She looked directly at Shirley Thompson. You want to know if we're sleeping together? We're not. You want to know if we're in love? I don't know, but I know that for the first time in 5 years, I wake up and don't immediately wish I hadn't. If that's a sin, then condemn me. But don't you dare tell me I'm dishonoring a marriage that Michael himself called suffocating. The sanctuary erupted, people talking over each other, some in shock, some in outrage. Pastor Reynolds called for order, but the chaos took several minutes to settle. Elder Thompson's face had gone crimson. These are serious allegations against a deceased man who cannot defend himself. James stepped forward, his turn now. Then let me defend him, because I think Michael understood something most of you don't. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to an email Deacon William had forwarded after much convincing. 3 months before Michael died, he went to Deacon William, asked him to watch over Linda, to make sure she didn't lock herself away. And he said this. James read from the screen. Tell Linda not to mourn me forever. I haven't been a real husband to her in years. If she finds someone who makes her smile again, that's good. Better than good. It's what I should have given her, but couldn't anymore. He looked up at the congregation. Michael knew his marriage was over. He'd ended it emotionally years ago with those letters. But he was still human enough to want Linda to be happy after he was gone. So before you cast judgment on behalf of his memory, maybe consider that his actual wishes were for exactly what's happening. Deacon William stood, confirming, It's true. Michael said those words to me. I didn't share them because I thought it would cause pain, but Brother James is right. Michael specifically wanted Linda to move forward. Shirley Thompson stood abruptly. This is revisionist history. You're rewriting Michael's character to justify your own behavior. Linda turned to her. Shirley, you've been documenting my comings and goings like I'm a criminal. You've taken photos, sent emails, built a case, all because 2 people who lost their spouses found comfort in each other's company. Tell me, when did grief get a rule book? When did you become its enforcer? I'm protecting the integrity of this church. From what? 2 lonely people drinking tea together? It's more than tea, and you know it. James's patience snapped. You want to know what it is? It's 2 people who spent years watching their spouses drift away. It's understanding that death sometimes happens long before the body stops. It's knowing that everyone expects you to be devastated when mostly you're just tired and guilty for not being devastated enough. His voice rose. 3 years of quiet suffering finding volume. I loved Margaret, loved her completely for 35 years. But the last few years, we were going through motions. She knew it. I knew it. We just didn't have the courage Michael had to admit it. He faced the congregation fully. You want to remove me as deacon? Fine. You want us to leave this church? We'll go. But don't pretend this is about morality or propriety. This is about your discomfort with grief that doesn't perform the way you expect. Elder Thompson stood, trying to regain control. Brother James, we're not trying to punish you. We're trying to uphold standards. Standards that say a 62-year-old man can't have a friend because she's a woman and her husband died 2 weeks ago. Those standards? The room had gone silent again, everyone waiting to see how the elders would respond. Elder Sarah Mitchell, who'd been quiet until now, stood. She was 70, had been widowed twice. May I say something? Thompson looked reluctant, but nodded. Mitchell addressed the congregation with the authority of age and experience. I've been in this church for 47 years. I've watched this community rally around people in crisis, feed the hungry, comfort the mourning. But I've also watched us be cruel in the name of propriety." She looked at Linda. "When my first husband died, I was 31, a young widow with 2 children. Within 3 months, I started seeing someone. The church nearly excommunicated me, said I was disrespecting Harold's memory, that I needed to mourn properly." Her voice thickened with old pain. I listened, broke off the relationship, spent 2 miserable years alone because I was too afraid of judgment to choose happiness. By the time I felt it was appropriate to date again, the man I'd loved had married someone else. She wiped her eyes. "I won't watch this church make the same mistake twice. James and Linda are adults. They're not breaking commandments. They're just trying to survive. If we can't show compassion for that, what are we even doing here?" Several people nodded. Others looked conflicted. The congregation was splitting in real time. Deacon Williams stepped forward. "I move that we table this discussion, that we allow James and Linda to work through their grief without congregational interference, that we remember our calling is to comfort the brokenhearted, not police their healing." Seconded. Elder Mitchell's voice was firm, but Elder Thompson shook his head. "We still need to address the overnight stays, the appearance of cohabitation. That's a valid concern, regardless of intent." Linda's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, face shifting to something between shock and pain. "Excuse me." She walked quickly toward the exit. James followed without hesitation, leaving the elders mid-debate. Outside, Linda stood by her car, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, this is she." "What? When?" Her face drained of color. James moved closer, concerned. "I understand. Yes, I can be there this afternoon. Thank you for calling." She lowered the phone, staring at nothing. "That was Michael's lawyer. There's been a development with the estate. He found something. Wants me to come to his office today." "What kind of development?" He wouldn't say over the phone. Just that it's time-sensitive and involves Michael's will. James drove her to the lawyer's office in downtown Denver, neither speaking much during the 20-minute trip. The meeting in the church had left them both raw, exposed. Adding legal complications felt like salt in fresh wounds. Attorney David Brennan met them in a conference room, lined with law books and framed degrees. Late 50s, gray at the temples, the kind of polished professional who'd seen every family drama unfold behind closed doors. "Mrs. Martinez, thank you for coming on short notice. And Mr. Robinson, I assume." "James Robinson." "I'm a friend. Linda asked me to come." Brennan's expression suggested he'd heard about their friendship through the legal community grapevine. Small town, smaller circles. What I'm about to share is sensitive. Michael left specific instructions about when this information should be disclosed. He opened a file, pulling out a document. 3 weeks before his death, Michael amended his will. He left you the house, his pension, and liquid assets, totaling approximately $1.2 million. Linda nodded. "I knew about that. Christopher mentioned it. What you didn't know is that Michael also left a letter with instructions that it only be given to you if certain conditions were met." "What conditions?" "If, within 3 months of his death, you began a relationship with someone new, specifically with James Robinson." The room tilted. Linda gripped the edge of the table. How would he know? Brennan pulled out an envelope, Michael's handwriting across the front. "For Linda, if she chooses to live." Michael anticipated this possibility. He was quite specific about the circumstances under which this letter should be delivered. Linda took the envelope with shaking hands. James wanted to touch her, offer support, but felt suddenly like an intruder in something too private for witnesses. "Should I? Stay, please." She opened the envelope carefully, unfolding pages of Michael's handwriting. Her eyes moved across the words, tears finally coming after weeks of drought. She read silently for several minutes while James and Brennan waited in awkward suspension. Finally, she handed James the letter without speaking. He read, Michael's voice coming through the ink. "Linda, if you're reading this, it means my gamble paid off. It means you found someone. It means you chose life over the performance of grief. Good. I need to tell you some things I never had the courage to say while I was alive. I'm a coward, always have been. That's why I wrote those letters to Maria instead of actually leaving. That's why I stayed in a marriage that stopped feeding either of us years ago. I saw the way you looked at James Robinson. Don't be embarrassed. I noticed because I remembered looking at you that way once, back when we first met. The way your whole face would change when you saw him working in his yard. The way you'd time your trips to get the mail just so you'd have an excuse to wave. I wasn't angry, I was relieved, because it meant you still had the capacity to feel something, that our dead marriage hadn't killed that part of you completely. I went to see Deacon William 3 months before I died, told him to make sure you didn't lock yourself away. But I also asked him something else. I asked him to watch for signs that you and James might find each other, to facilitate it if he could. He refused, said it wasn't his place, but I could die knowing I'd at least tried to give you permission. Here's what I want you to know. You didn't fail our marriage. I did. I checked out emotionally years ago and expected you to just accept it. I let work become an excuse, let distance become routine. By the time I realized what I'd lost, I didn't know how to get it back. So I wrote letters to a woman in Albuquerque and pretended I was brave enough to actually leave. The cancer was horrible, yes, but in some ways it was a relief. It gave our dying marriage a narrative that wasn't just slow erosion. It gave you a reason to care for me that wasn't about love anymore. It gave us both an exit that didn't require the courage to choose it. If James is reading this over your shoulder right now, and I suspect he is because you're probably too overwhelmed to process it alone, I have something to say to him too. Take care of her. She's going to feel guilty about this for a long time. About us, about you, about everything. She's going to second-guess every moment of happiness and wonder if she's dishonoring my memory. Tell her I'm giving permission, explicit, written permission. Our marriage ended years ago. We just kept going through motions because we didn't know how else to be. You're not taking her from me. I already left. Linda, you gave me 32 years. Some of them were beautiful. Some were just maintenance. You held my hand while I died and never once complained about how heavy that burden was. You earned the right to be happy, so be happy. With James, or with someone else, or alone, if that's what feeds you. Just stop performing grief for an audience that never understood what we actually were. One more thing. The money I'm leaving you, it's guilt money. Conscience payment for all the years I checked out. Use it for something that matters. Use it to build a life I never gave you. I loved you, Linda. Past tense, because I think I stopped somewhere in there and just forgot to notice. But I loved you once, and that counts for something. Live. That's all I'm asking. Just live. Michael. James finished reading and carefully handed the pages back to Linda. She folded them with precision, hands steadier now. Brennan cleared his throat. There's one more thing. Michael also left a trust fund. $50,000 earmarked specifically for what he called grief counseling or whatever Linda needs to move forward. He specified that it could be used however you see fit: travel, therapy, even, and I quote, helping her neighbor fix up his workshop if that's what she wants. Linda laughed, the sound broken and bewildered. He knew. The whole time he knew. He was observant, and from what I can tell, he wanted to make amends the only way he knew how: by giving you freedom. They left the lawyer's office an hour later, stepping into afternoon sunshine that felt aggressive in its brightness. Linda held the letter like it might disintegrate. James walked her to her car in silence. Words felt inadequate, too small for what Michael had done. Reached from beyond death to grant permission no one should need but everyone craved. Linda opened her car door, then stopped. He was right about everything. The way I looked at you, the timing of my mail trips. God, was I that obvious? I never noticed. Too busy trying not to notice you. She smiled, despite the tear tracks on her face. What do we do now? James considered the question. The church was probably still debating their fate. Christopher was probably on a plane back to San Francisco, his father's memory newly complicated. The neighborhood gossips were probably already circulating the news that Linda had been at the lawyer's office with James. We go home, figure out what comes next. Together? Yeah, together. They drove separately back to the neighborhood, force of habit still dictating some behaviors. But when they arrived, Linda parked in James's driveway instead of her own. A small declaration, a line crossed. Inside, James made tea while Linda sat at the kitchen table rereading Michael's letter. Outside, Shirley Thompson walked past with her dog, slowing to observe Linda's car in James's driveway in broad daylight. Let her look. Let them all look. Linda set down the letter. I need to do something. Something definitive. James set a mug in front of her. What did you have in mind? I'm going to clean out Michael's room. Everything. Clothes, books, all of it. I've been putting it off because it felt like erasing him, but he's not there anymore. He hasn't been for years. You want help? Yes, but not today. Today I need to sit with this letter and understand that my marriage ended a long time ago, that I'm not betraying anything by moving forward. James understood, sat across from her, his own mug untouched. Margaret left me a letter, too. Ashley found it when we were going through her things after the accident. What did it say? That she knew we'd been drifting apart, that she blamed herself for becoming so focused on work and friends that she'd stopped seeing me as a husband and more as a housemate. She apologized for that. Did it help, knowing she felt it too? Yes and no. It validated what I'd been feeling, but was too scared to admit. But it also made me sad. We had 3 years after she wrote that letter. Could have talked about it, tried to fix it. Instead, we just kept pretending until a drunk driver made the conversation permanent. Linda reached across the table, taking his hand. The gesture had become familiar, the specific weight and warmth of her fingers interlacing with his. We're quite a pair. 2 people who stayed in dead marriages because it was easier than leaving. At least we're honest about it now. They sat in the fading afternoon light, 2 people holding hands across a kitchen table, surrounded by the ghosts of marriages that had ended in stages. First emotionally, then legally through death, now finally being laid to rest through truth and acceptance. Linda's phone buzzed. Christopher. Mom, I'm at the airport. Had a lot of time to think. Dad's letters, they explain a lot. Why you two seemed so distant, why he worked so much, why you looked so relieved when he died. I'm sorry I judged you. She typed back, Thank you. That means more than you know. Another message, Are you happy with James? Linda looked at James across the table, at this man who'd opened his door to a grieving stranger and somehow become the person she looked for first thing every morning. I'm getting there. For the first time in years, I'm getting there. Christopher's response came immediately. Then that's enough for me. Dad would want that too. She showed James the messages. He read them, something easing in his expression. One down, how many more to convince? Does it matter? Linda's voice carried certainty James hadn't heard before. We have Michael's permission in writing. We have Christopher's acceptance. The church can vote however they want. I'm done asking strangers for permission to feel alive. That evening, they sat on James's back patio, watching stars emerge against the darkening sky. Linda had changed into jeans and one of James's old sweatshirts, the sleeves hanging past her hands. She looked younger in the oversized clothing, less like a widow and more like someone capable of new beginnings. Tomorrow I'm calling a realtor, she announced. I'm selling the house. James turned to her, surprised. You sure? Positive. I can't build a new life in a house full of old death. Every room has a memory I don't want to keep reliving. The den where Michael's hospital bed sat. The kitchen where I crushed his pills. The bedroom we stopped sharing years before he got sick. She pulled the sweatshirt tighter. Michael left me enough money to start over, so that's what I'm going to do. Start over. Where will you go? That depends. On what? On whether you'd consider selling your house too. James absorbed the implication, the invitation, the future being sketched in real time. And if I would, then maybe we buy something together, something that isn't haunted by our past marriages, somewhere we can figure out what we are without ghosts watching from every corner. James thought about his house, Margaret's novels on the shelves, her embroidered towels, the coffee table with her wine stain, the careful museum he'd maintained for 3 years. I'd have to ask Ashley, Linda smiled. No, you wouldn't. You'd have to tell her. There's a difference. You're right. He stood, moving to the porch railing. I'll call her tomorrow. Tell her I'm ready to stop living in a shrine. Linda joined him at the railing, shoulder pressing against his. Are we really doing this? Moving in together after knowing each other, really knowing each other, for 3 weeks? Apparently. People are going to lose their minds. They already have. Might as well give them something real to talk about. James turned to face her fully. This close, he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes he'd noticed that first day, could smell the faint scent of his laundry detergent on his sweatshirt, on her body. Linda. He tested the weight of her name on his tongue. Are we in love? She considered the question seriously. I don't know. I think maybe we're in survival, and survival looks a lot like love when you're drowning. Is that enough? For now? Yes. For later, we'll figure it out. She leaned up and kissed him, not the tentative brush from 3 weeks ago, but a real kiss, the kind that said she'd made a choice and was committing to it, the kind that tasted like grief and hope in equal measure. When they pulled apart, both breathing harder, Linda rested her forehead against his chest. I'm terrified. This could blow up in our faces. We could be making a huge mistake. James wrapped his arms around her, holding her against the uncertainty. Probably. But I'd rather make mistakes while living than play it safe while dying. They stood on the patio as night deepened around them, two people who'd spent years performing for audiences finally deciding to write their own script. It wouldn't be neat, wouldn't follow anyone's timeline or meet anyone's expectations, but it would be theirs, complicated and messy and built on foundations of loss and understanding, not perfect, just real. And after years of pretending, real felt revolutionary. Inside, James's phone rang. Ashley, right on schedule with her nightly check-in. He answered, Linda still in his arms. Hey, sweetie. Dad, you sound different. What happened? I went to church, had some conversations, made some decisions. What kind of decisions? The kind where I stop living in the past, where I admit your mother and I had problems we never addressed, where I accept that moving forward isn't betrayal. Silence. Then, are you selling the house? How'd you know? Because that house is a museum, and you're not a curator. You're a 62-year-old man who deserves to live. James felt emotion tighten his throat. When did you get so wise? I've been trying to tell you this for 3 years. You finally ready to listen? Yeah, I think I am. Good. Ashley's voice softened. And, Dad, I'm glad you found Linda, or that she found you. However it happened, you deserve someone who sees you as more than Margaret's widower. After they hung up, Linda looked up at him. That went well. Better than expected. She pulled back slightly, hands resting on his chest. Tomorrow starts the hard part. Packing up our old lives. Dealing with realtors. Finding a new place. People are going to judge every step. James covered her hands with his. Let them judge. We've spent enough time worrying about other people's opinions on how we should grieve. Time to write our own rules. Linda nodded, resolve settling over her features. Okay, new rules. Starting now. They went inside, and for the first time, Linda didn't head to the guest room. Instead, she stayed in the living room, curled on the couch with a blanket, while James sat in the armchair reading. Comfortable silence, shared space, the quiet intimacy of two people who didn't need conversation to feel connected. Around 10, Linda's phone buzzed. Deacon William. The elders voted, 4-3. They're asking you both to step back from church leadership, but not requesting you leave the congregation. Elder Mitchell fought hard for you, said some things that needed saying. Linda showed James the message. He felt relief mixed with resignation. Compromise. Not acceptance, but not exile either. How do you feel about that? Honestly? Fine. I'll miss being a deacon, but I won't miss defending my grief to committees. Think we'll stay at First Baptist? Linda considered. Maybe, maybe not. Depends if we want to spend every Sunday feeling like we're on trial. Might be easier to find a new church. Fresh start, fresh start. The phrase had become their mantra, a promise and a plan. They sat in comfortable quiet until Linda's eyes started drooping. James walked her to the guest room, then hesitated at the doorway. Tomorrow night you don't have to sleep here if you don't want. Where else would I sleep? I mean the guest room. We could... Linda smiled, understanding. One step at a time, James. We're moving fast enough already. You're right. Sorry. She kissed his cheek. But ask me again in a month, when we're in our own place. When we've had time to grieve properly and figure out what we actually are. Deal. James went to his own room, climbing into bed that still felt too big, still smelled faintly of Margaret's lavender lotion. Tomorrow he'd strip these sheets, pack them away, start dismantling the museum. Tomorrow they'd call realtors and start house hunting. Tomorrow they'd face the neighborhood gossips and the church whispers with their heads high. Tomorrow they'd take another step toward whatever future they were building. But tonight he lay in bed knowing Linda was down the hall, alive and safe, and choosing to be there. And that knowledge, that simple companionship, felt like the first real breath he'd taken in 3 years. Outside, the grandfather clock chimed 11. In the guest room, Linda turned off her light. In houses around the neighborhood, people probably gossiped and judged and predicted disaster. Let them. James and Linda Martinez Robinson, they hadn't combined names yet, hadn't even discussed it, but the hyphen felt inevitable. Were too busy surviving to care what anyone else thought about their methods. Grief, it turned out, wasn't a straight line or a scheduled program. It was messy and complicated, and sometimes looked like two broken people deciding that broken together beat drowning alone. And if that made them scandalous, If it upset congregations and disappointed children and offended propriety, so be it. They'd earned the right to choose survival over performance, had paid for it in years of slow suffocation and careful pretending, and marriages that died in stages. Now came the living part, the scary, uncertain, probably too soon part, where they figured out what they were building from the rubble. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be real. And real, after all those years of pretending, felt like coming home.